Acidosis and alkalosis, a very brief introduction. First you have to ask, is it acidosis or is it alkalosis? And for this, I'm sending you back to your reference materials. Look at the pH first. That's going to tell you if this person has acidosis or alkalosis. So you have to be able to answer, what is normal pH? What's the pH if someone has acidosis, and what is it if they have alkalosis? The next question you ask is it respiratory or metabolic? A very simplistic explanation is that if it is associated with lung function, ventilation, diffusion, breathing rate, any of those, and it has to do with carbon dioxide, it's respiratory. So respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis has to do with carbon dioxide being too high or too low. And remember, the capillaries around the alveoli, that's where the oxygen goes into the system, into the blood system, and the carbon dioxide comes out into the lungs to be expired with the next breath. So since respiratory imbalance has to do with carbon dioxide, it has to do with either exhaling too much carbon dioxide or not exhaling enough. Why would someone exhale too much carbon dioxide? Well, the simple answer again is hyperventilation, breathing too fast and too deep, which occurs when someone panics or is afraid, and it also can happen at times when they're in great pain. So regardless of what's happening with their oxygen level, they're getting rid of too much carbon dioxide, and that's resulting in respiratory alkalosis. So what are we going to do about hyperventilation? We want them to rebreathe some of that carbon dioxide back in to try and get their levels normal. And the easy solution is to have them breathe in and out of a paper bag until the episode passes. Now we'll get into other things we can do in other classes, but this is the very simple first step. Now before we go into respiratory acidosis, let's review the process of ventilation very briefly. When someone takes a breath in, they're using their muscles, they are working, they're using energy. It's a forceful act. But usually expiration is just a process of relaxing, letting the diaphragm relax and just letting the air out. In some diseases, such as emphysema, the bronchial walls are weakened. These bronchioles then tend to collapse unless they are forced open. Well, they're forced open during the forced inspiration, because it is. Inspiration is an active event. So at that time, the bronchioles are forced open, but remember, exhalation is relaxation, so they tend to collapse, which means air gets trapped within the alveoli. The little alveoli just don't have this big squeeze to force the air out, so the bronchioles collapse. So the carbon dioxide that was supposed to be exhaled is trapped in the alveoli and can be reabsorbed into the bloodstream, then causing respiratory acidosis. One of the things that we can do, people with emphysema, COPD, is called pursed lip breathing, and that helps the alveoli to stay open during expiration. And it's similar to what you do when you blow out a candle. Okay, what else would cause carbon dioxide to be retained within the bloodstream rather than passed out of the body through the air, through the respirations? Well, central nervous system depression can cause respiratory depression. The central nervous system is what stimulates the lungs to breathe. And if it is depressed, the person's going to go into respiratory depression. It's a common problem when someone takes or is given too much of certain types of drugs like narcotics or barbiturates. It causes the breathing to slow down to a very, very slow pace, which can be very dangerous. And because they're slow breathing and they tend to be shallow breathing, they're just not blowing off enough carbon dioxide. Metabolic. If the source of the problem is not respiratory, well, then it's going to be metabolic. And it has to do with bicarbonates. Common causes of metabolic alkalosis. Okay, let's think about the stomach. Stomach's full of acid, right? Heartburn. That's from the acid that's normally in the stomach. The acid is there to help the food to digest. So if a person is vomiting, they're getting rid of the acids. And in the early stage of vomiting, a person can go into metabolic alkalosis. Now, if the vomiting goes on for a long period of time, it's a different story. But for the normal kind of vomiting that people have, they can go into metabolic alkalosis. Another common cause of this is, remember, stomach acid, well, heartburn, people take antacids. If they take too many antacids, they can put themselves into metabolic alkalosis. The kidneys play a part in keeping the pH within the normal range. So if a person has kidney failure, renal failure, they are going to have troubles with metabolic acidosis. If someone's blood sugar is very high, and I mean very, very high, they can go into what's known as diabetic ketoacidosis. It's a form of metabolic acidosis. It can be quite dangerous, and it's associated with people who have uncontrolled diabetes. Prolonged diarrhea can cause the body to lose bicarbonates and therefore cause metabolic acidosis. And the final one that I'm just going to mention, we'll learn more about it later, is that if someone is in shock, that can cause metabolic acidosis.